right. Well, I am Brittany Polat. I am president and co-founder of Stoicare, and I'm here with my co-host, Simon Drew.
Yeah, thanks, Brittany, and welcome everybody. My name is Simon Drew. I'm the co-founder of the Walled Garden Philosophical Society, and it's a real pleasure to be here with everybody. Brittany, did you want to dive in? Shall we begin the proceedings?
Yeah, I guess we're on a pretty tight schedule for today, so
Yeah.
we just wanted to kind of give a brief overview and introduction of what we're all doing here today. You know, the title is Lighting the Way. So we're looking at philosophical role models of the past and present. And this is something that just keeps coming up is that as Stoics or people practicing some kind of practical life philosophy, we really need role models. You know, it's different from a kind of philosophy where you have rules that you have to follow, right? So we tend to look for people who are practicing virtue in their lives to guide and inspire us. So Simon and I, and also thank you to Meredith Alexander Kunz for proposing this idea. So applause for Meredith. So we all wanted to come together today and talk about some role models and maybe some from the past that we all turn to their writings, such as the well-known Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, but also some others that might be a little bit less well-known. So we'll hear about Hypatia, for instance, and Hipparchia, and Thich Nhat Hanh, and some other role models from the present as well. So thank you again for being here. Simon, over to you.
Sure. Yeah, look, but before we dive in today, I just wanted to mention a few words just to get the framing right for this beautiful event. You know, when we have events in person at a location, there's a very clear feeling that we get going to that location, sitting in that location, being in the atmosphere. We know what we're there to do. I think one of the challenges with online events like this is often we don't get into that headspace before we jump in. And what we're really doing here today is we are creating a space. This is a space, and we do have a goal for today. It's to get as much wisdom as we can from the next couple, 2.5 hours, to take away into our lives and to better our lives, to move towards a flourishing life, a more meaningful existence. And so I just want to encourage everybody to make this a space that you've come to today. To remember to frame this as, the next 2.5 hours. Let's try and put the distractions down. Let's try and get into the headspace of being here in this moment with these people, these beautiful people, with this message that we're all here to discuss. And I just want to encourage us to be present, aware, and just to absorb as much as you possibly can today, because we have so many beautiful speakers here today. And I'm just really excited to listen to everybody and to take away as much as I can. So thank you for carving away 2.5 hours in what I'm sure is very busy schedules. There's a lot of things that you could be doing on a Saturday. And so it's just a real honor and pleasure to have you all here today, both the speakers and our guests coming along to listen in. So yeah, and thank you, Brittany, as well, and everybody from Stoicare for helping out with organizing this event. It's beautiful to come together as two organizations with really a shared goal, shared purpose, and so it's a pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you to you, Simon, and the Walled Garden for also co-organizing. It's been a great experience. And yeah, just echoing what Simon said, thank you for taking time out today. Feel free to put comments or questions in the chat. We should have time at the end of each speaker to have a few questions. So if something occurs to you while the speaker is talking, feel free to put it in the chat or, comments or applause for the speaker. Just we ask that you keep it relevant to the current speaker and not, talk about speakers who came before or who will come after. Just stay focused on the current speaker if you would. All right. I think everyone is here. So with that, we'll start a couple of minutes early with Meredith, if that's okay with you, Meredith. Make sure We've got Meredith here, and it is my great honor to introduce Meredith Alexander Kunz. She's a writer, editor, and communications leader who has worked in journalism, higher education, the technology industry. She's done a little bit of everything, honestly. Her writing has appeared in newspapers and magazines like Newsweek, the San Francisco Daily Journal, and the Industry Standard. And in our sphere, our Stoic sphere, she is well known for creating the Stoic Mom blog, started in 2016. So you can find that at thestoicmom.com or also now on Substack at the same name, thestoicmom.substack.com. And I encourage you to check that out. She has wonderful content, both about parenting and about life in general and philosophy. So she explores the many ways that caregivers and kids can benefit from practicing Stoic life philosophy. She is also trained in compassion, and so I love to hear her speak about compassion as well. She has an upcoming book with Massimo Pigliucci and Greg Lopez, tentatively titled Navigating the Good Life. So maybe she'll tell us a little bit about that later. And this book will share practical applications of ancient Greek and Roman philosophy, which I know we're all interested in here. She's also a coach who works with clients seeking inspiration and meaningful goals in their work. So with that, thank you, Meredith, so much for being here.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you very much to you, Brittany, and to Simon for organizing this event. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to learn from all of you. So let me start to share some slides that I've created. Okay, can you see my slides? I hope that I got a thumbs up. Very good. Thank you so much. So yes, thanks again. I've been writing about Stoicism since 2016, and I've written a lot about topics around being a parent and a caregiver, and also about how kids and teens can actually benefit from Stoic ideas and learning about philosophical approaches. And I every day I find more examples of why that matters in my life and my kids' lives. So I'm glad to be doing that and happy to share that, as mentioned on my Substack and my blog. And I've been exploring a lot of other very fascinating schools of Greek and Roman philosophy, especially with my co-authors, Greg, who I saw was here today. Hi, Greg, and Massimo. We're looking at, I think, 13 different schools of philosophy. And right now, I want to just share kind of a little bit of some things I've learned about some role models, because I think that this really matters. And I'll share a little bit more about all of that. Okay, so let me make sure this is going to advance here. Okay, I think it's advancing. Great. So these are three philosophical and historical inspirations I'd like to share with you today. And here's just a little preview of why I chose them. I'll go into much more detail, so I'll just kind of start you off with this as a teaser to what's coming next. So why role models, in fact? Why are we even talking about role models? Well, it's really stories that we remember. When we live our lives, we're not really thinking about statistics on, how many students who study math will end up becoming math majors or something. I don't know. That's something my daughter was talking about, actually, but it's a topic that we all know. We find stories inspiring. We find stories tell us much more than just a couple facts. And these days, I find we often tell ourselves negative stories about people and their failings, and we kind of look where other people aren't doing well, and there's a lot of that online. But in ancient times, and even up to early modern times, there was a concept of exemplary lives, role models with sort of a moral purpose or a philosophical purpose about how we should live. And I have found this fascinating. I'm a former historian. That's still part of my life. I find it really amazing to look at people's biographies and figure out what motivated them, what did they care about. And I think we can find role models who give us a chance to really explore how to personify values and virtues and how to struggle with challenges. It's a contrast to the age of influencers. I mean, influencers online are not really role models. They're driven most often by the profit motive. And I think role models, the difference there is they're people who've lived authentically, not really to get just money or attention. And, they found their path. They're not perfect, by the way. That's another thing I will say. We don't have to look to our role models to be perfect, but they can be somehow inspiring to us and helping us live through very chaotic times, in a way that's creative and questioning and inspirational, as they work towards the virtues. So that's what I'm looking for in my role models, and I think that's why we should care about this. Then the question of why me to present about this topic. I'm on the journey with you, and I think that we all have a lot that we're coping with today, and so I'm always looking for inspiration and hope. There's a way of thinking about the world that brings us to new opportunities to find our goals and new chances to live better for myself, my family, my community, my world, my cosmos. So I just mentioned here some of the ways I'm sharing work. Please check them out if you have a chance. I have a Substack, as Brittany mentioned. I have a blog that is really what's on the Substack now. And I'm on Instagram and I'm on X. And also I launched a blog about coaching because it's something I'm really interested in for many of the same reasons of why I'm interested in role models, is that we can look to a variety of ways to live better and to find within ourselves how we want to relate to the world in new ways. And I think coaching also really helps with that. And Brittany mentioned the book that I've been working on. That's also been teaching me so many other new ways to think about the art of living. So that is hopefully coming next year. So the first person I'd like to share about today is Hipparchia. She's not very well known. She was a Cynic philosopher, and I will share with you a little bit more about her background. Oops, I think I went backwards by mistake. Oh, there we go. So this is an image from an ancient fresco of Hipparchia of Maronea and Crates of Thebes. And Crates was her husband. So that is an important part of her biography, which I'll get to in a moment. She was born in around 350 BCE in Maronea, which is in Thrace in Greece, and she died around 280 BCE. So here's a quote that I thought was an interesting way to introduce you to her. Do you suppose that I'd be wrong if, instead of wasting further time upon the loom, I spent it in education? So there's a story that goes along with this quote that I'd like to share. And this is from Diogenes Laertius, The Lives of Eminent Philosophers, which is a great book if you've never checked it out. It's an ancient book. I mean, it was not contemporaneous with most of the people he wrote about, but it brings together so many anecdotes and stories about ancient philosophers that's just fascinating. Some of it very gossipy and some of it very serious. So I definitely recommend that. And in Diogenes Laertius, he tells the story of when Hipparchia and Crates went to a symposium, a drinking party, and they kind of end up in Lysimachus's home, and everyone's there drinking wine. And Hipparchia is this sort of outrageous person. Why is she here? Why is this woman here who's not one of the courtesans that might be there as women, the only other women there? She's there and she's a philosopher. And of course she is there with her husband. The backstory is that she kind of she came into contact with Crates because of her brother studying philosophy, and her brother, the story is in Diogenes Laertius that he became reclusive and suicidal because of an incident he had where he publicly passed gas, and somehow this was like so traumatizing to him that he like locked himself in a room, and Crates went to find him and said, and he ate beforehand something that causes a ton of gas. He showed up and he passed gas in front of the brother, and he said, "Oh, okay, I guess I don't need to end it right now. I guess I need to just move past this." And so she came into contact with him, and he was a, much older man, not much to look at apparently, but Hipparchia was taken with him, and above all, I think with his ideas. I think she was really inspired by him and his desire to live by his own principles, not conform to his society. So at this symposium, a man named Theodorus, the atheist, challenged Hipparchia, and he basically was, why is she here? And so she kind of clapped back at him to talk about, what's wrong with focusing on education, and she kind of gave him um, a sort of a taste of his own medicine with a little argument about, well, if it's okay for Theodorus to do something to himself, then it must be okay for others to do it. And he said, well, yes. And then she came up with the example of hitting himself. So maybe Hipparchia could start hitting him too. So it was kind of an odd moment. And then he was not too pleased. He tried to go over and like lift up her dress, but she didn't care, because one of the principles of her cynic system was that humans are natural without clothes, and humans don't need all this physical paraphernalia of modern life, at that time modern life, which was, clothing to cover their shameful body parts. The part of their concept was they would not feel shame, and that they would just live by their authentic nature given laws, freeing themselves from social convention and relying on reason to speak freely, even to the most powerful people. There's a very famous story of Diogenes, the cynic, different Diogenes, who talked back to Alexander the Great, "You're standing in my sun," when he came to talk to him when he was living on the street. So she also was there living on the street with Crates. So this is kind of a little bit about her background, acceptance of, they essentially had no belongings except, a knapsack and a tattered cloak, and they lived the way they felt they should. So these were the reasons why I was inspired by her. Fearless, she didn't back down. She fought for her right to be there, to have a seat at the table and be educated. Nonconformist, went against her society's norms for the, kind of marriage that she would pick. Her parents wanted her to marry someone else, but she chose Crates and that life. And she taught by doing. She really went out there and was a role model of how to be extremely bold, fearless, brave. And so some lessons for us today: choose ideas that inspire you, stay true to them, fight for rights, and form allies. Crates was her ally here. She would not have gotten into that room without Crates. So it's okay to have allies. It's good. But then keep up the fight, and defending your seat at the table, valuing education, and teaching others through actions. And I sort of thought, if you had one thing you might take away from this, it's that challenge yourself to do a hard thing. And despite the structural barriers and potential criticism, let's be bold. I'd say this to myself when I start to think about all the barriers and all the issues and all the problems. So that's what I'll leave you with on her. Keep going to Seneca. So I'm sure you're probably all aware of Seneca. This is a little teaser to why I'm interested in him as a role model, a wise and perfect human striving for virtue, and a writer at heart. I'll show you an image of a sculpture of Seneca the Younger. He was born in Spain in 4 BCE and died in near Rome in 65 BCE. And I'll tell you a little more about his biography. Here's a quote that I like from Seneca. I think maybe it's a little hard to parse at first reading, but once it sinks in, it's interesting. And I've changed some of the wording here to be inclusive of his and hers. The person who devotes every second of his or her time to his or her own needs, and who organizes each day as if it were a complete life, neither longs for nor is afraid of the next day. Addition can be made to this life, but nothing taken away from it. So I will share more about his biography. So he was actually born in Spain, but it was a prominent Roman family. Of course, the Roman Empire was huge at that point. He cycled in and out of Roman power structures, and he served in the Senate. He was known for his oratorial skills. He was a great speaker, apparently, and he had an interesting relationship with the imperial family. After Caligula was assassinated, and Claudius ascended to the throne, Seneca was exiled to Corsica. Claudius's wife accused him of adultery and just kind of wanted him out of the way. And there's a lot of theories about why that happened. Probably it wasn't adultery. It was probably politics, basically. And later he was recalled to Rome by Claudius after his new wife, Agrippina, recommended that Seneca tutor her 12-year-old son, Nero. She had a lot of political ambitions for Nero, and Seneca came to work with him. And after Claudius's death, Nero did become emperor, and his mother was influencing him along with Seneca and a Praetorian prefect, Burrus. So they were kind of trying to guide this young person to administer and rule the empire. And it's said that Seneca really worked to restrain Nero's impulses as much as he could. But things got pretty dicey. Nero had his own mother killed, and he became increasingly unstable. Seneca tried to step down, but apparently Nero twice denied him the ability to quit his job. So he was not very happy, I think, with this kind of situation he found himself in. He eventually escaped from court, but unfortunately Nero accused him of plotting to kill him and replace him, and so sentenced him to die. He was given the chance to kill himself, and his suicide was actually kind of legendary because it was a very long process. I won't go into all the details, but he did do it. But he was known also to many people for kind of dying by his beliefs, by his Stoic beliefs, because he was a Stoic. He wrote philosophy of Stoicism, which was a little bit eclectic, but very I definitely recommend reading Seneca, and there's a variety of new translations because he is also just a great writer. As someone who does a lot of writing, I can admire his writerly qualities of drawing you into a topic with stories and with his own experiences and with honestly his vulnerability about himself. You don't always know what to think because there's a lot in there, but you can really get a sense of him as someone who was really trying. And one thing he wrote was he was crawling after virtue and how hard it was. I mean, I love this image actually of crawling after virtue. Like you're just kind of, he knew it wasn't easy. And one of the things that made it that way for him is he was a very rich and powerful person surrounded by temptations. And it said he got his wealth from, high interest loans and things that maybe are somewhat unsavory. So we do have to keep that in mind about Seneca, but that's kind of what I think also makes him interesting. He was a real person, a real man. And he also at one point talked about how we're all patients in the same hospital and there's really no doctor. We're all just, out there trying to live our lives, and we have a duty to make ourselves better, even though there's no expert to really teach us. Also, as a side note, he did suffer from asthma and tuberculosis. So he had a lot to overcome, even though he ended up becoming a wealthy man. He had both the politics and his own health issues to deal with. And he eventually did die of politics, I would say. Here's the three top things I think that inspire me about his life. He was very aware and articulate, but he was also aware, and part of what his awareness is his own struggles and inconsistencies. And he shared his experiences in his writing that I think is very relatable to us today. He worked to improve himself. And I'll mention that in one of the practice that I would recommend from Seneca. He really worked to try to understand where he was going wrong and how to get better and how to aim towards virtue and crawl on that path. And he was brave. He had this unquittable job, but he kept trying his best to influence and do what he could in the situation he was in, which is, in my opinion, a very Stoic approach. And he kept that at that as long as he could. And then he died with dignity, unfortunately, but he made the situation the best that he could, and he left us a lot of great works. He also wrote plays, which we don't read as much, or I haven't read personally, but I think his philosophical works are definitely worth reading. So here's some lessons I've gained from Seneca. Write and speak to share your challenges and your learnings. other people will learn from that too, and maybe relate to you. Work for change, aligning with the virtues, but accept that all people must cope with adversity and failings, and focus your energy on the things that matter, living with intention. So the quote, going back to the quote that I mentioned, it really is that idea of living with intention, because if you really understand why you're doing what you're doing, and that what you're doing is well chosen, and it's not just serving others' needs, but serving your needs and the needs of virtue, you will live with intention, and you may have a full life in a single day, which I think is an amazing concept. And work on self-awareness and study philosophy. He believed that studying philosophy was, you could, live longer by understanding all the ideas of the people who came before you, which I think is super interesting, almost like encompassing all of the years of the world and of thought by studying it. So the practice that I'd like to share as a takeaway from Seneca is nightly journaling. And he also, I think, learned this from the Pythagoreans, and this is something common for Stoics. And I know this is something that Brittany has written a wonderful book on, which I urge you to check out. Nightly journaling, I think this is really powerful to do kind of last thing. And I have been trying to do this more, and it's made a difference for me personally. Write down what you did well and what you think you did less well at the day's end, and then kind of meditate on that list for self-improvement, and also even just for noticing. I mean, it caused me to notice how much I was doing, which seemed honestly like an insane amount, because I would come to the end of the day and I'd think, oh, I didn't get this done. I didn't get this done. I didn't get this done. And I didn't do that all that well. But then when I start to reflect, I did realize, well, actually, I did a lot. And in fact, most of those things I would say I'm going to put on the did well list, but then there's some things, maybe not. And then looking at those and why, and how could I change, and how could I evolve? And some of those were about, my own emotional responses to something, which I know I was just trying to process through. And even the act of writing it down, I think, helps process through it, as modern psychologists would tell us. So I think that's an amazing practice. And I thank Seneca for reminding us of that. Just one moment. And next, I would like to speak about Hypatia. She's an extremely fascinating figure. Some things to highlight about her are she was intellectual, engaged, and idealistic in a chaotic world. I have an image of her that may or may not be an image of her. It's actually taken from Raphael's School of Athens fresco in the Vatican. People like to think this might have been Hypatia. It probably wasn't. It was probably a young man. But let's imagine that it was her. And she was born in 355 CE and died in March 415 CE, both in Alexandria, Egypt. So a lot of her story is really the story of Alexandria in that later Roman period. Very, very interesting history. And I'll share a little bit more. Here's a quote that's from an ancient writer who was essentially a contemporary of her, or close contemporary, I believe, Damascus. Because she was skilled and articulate in her speech, and wise and politically virtuous in her actions, the city seemingly loved her and particularly prostrated itself before her. So her story is really fascinating. Alexandria was at that time a city of about 500,000 at the edge of Egypt. And she was this rare woman who ran her own school of philosophy, published books on mathematics, spoke publicly about very complicated ideas, and consulted with the leadership from Rome and also her fellow Alexandrian citizens. And this was a time when the city had pagan, Christian, and Jewish members, citizens in the city. She was known for her mathematical skills, and her father was also a mathematician. She used an astrolabe, which was a metal tool designed to estimate positions of stars and planets, and she kind of shared about that with her students. She would consult with average citizens who would come and try to get her wisdom and her guidance. She would give public lectures, for example, about Plato and Aristotle in Alexandria. And she held her own seminars in her own philosophical school on astronomy and math and philosophy. And she seemed to open her school to all. And in fact, her students were, the ones we know of, were Christians. She was a pagan. And she kind of represented an older way of thinking and learning, perhaps, but she was also very with the times, because she was open to working with and consulting with all of these individuals, as well as the Roman governor Orestes. Her philosophy was Neoplatonism, and I'll just say a little bit about that. So Neoplatonism, that she, in her formulation, which was related to Plotinus's, which is one of the originators of Neoplatonism. It did not really explicitly go against Christianity, at least in that day. In fact, some of the people who studied with her, were Christian leaders as well, in their own philosophical thinking. So they had this idea that, math was sort of the first rung of advanced study, and then the more advanced field was philosophy, which is really interesting if you think about how we consider these topics today. And, when my kids go to school or look at what they're going to study, it's like, wow, math is really kind of there at the top. But in fact, they kind of viewed math as sort of the basis of their philosophy. There was an idea of seeking the one, a divine force at the center of the universe that you could reach through contemplation and purification. And in her version of Neoplatonism, it was somewhat different from some other versions that focused more on like rituals and sacrifices, which sort of went against the Christian thinking or approach. So I think hers was much more open-minded in that sense, or like open to all. She was celibate, and the people that in her community of Neoplatonists, they expressed sort of a non-sexual love for one another, and they supported one another. But sadly, one of the things she's most known for is her violent death, when unfortunately she kind of got caught up in the political quandaries of her time. She was advising Orestes. There was another Christian leader, Cyril, who was trying to gain power, and he thought that, or he accused her of driving a wedge between him and Orestes. And then in March 415, essentially an angry Christian mob pulled her from her carriage in Alexandria and murdered her. I mean, they kind of tore her apart with, we think it was broken roof tiles or maybe shells. And then they burned her remains, and it was just absolutely brutal. And this has been accounted in many novels, films, and there's a modern journal named Hypatia after her to kind of commemorate her, her life. But also people think about, people view her in a way as a figure of, kind of the brutality of the religious uprising against her. But I think it was also very political. And some of her modern biographers say, let's not just look at her death, let's look at her life. And that's what I want to get back to. Let's look at her life and what was inspiring about her life. So I have 3 things that inspire me most about her. Her intellectualism, her kind of driven pursuit of math and philosophy with her Neoplatonism made her really a role model for, really purely pursuing the life of the mind. And I love that about her. And I think that that's something that we, especially women, should feel that we're encouraged to do it. Engaged, she was engaged with the government. She was engaged with her own fellow citizens, doing what she could and giving public lectures as a woman, extremely unusual. But it was a way that she felt her philosophy also told her, if you go back to Plato, there's an idea that we should engage with politics and government, at least on certain levels. So I admire that too, that even though it was a very troubled time, she kept trying to do this. She was open to working with all. She was idealistic in the sense of really bringing people together, and sort of the ideal of, we can all get along, we can all work together. I'm a pagan, you're a Christian, we can all communicate and strive for this contemplation of the good and the one. Lessons. So I will say that there's a lot, but I'll just pick these. Inform and educate yourself, even if it's tough material and you're not the typical student or teacher. So math, philosophy, she was not typical, but she did it, and she published in math and so on. Teach, speak, write, consult on big issues. Your ideas and engagement are valuable. work across boundaries, parties, factions, and groups. Encourage contemplation in yourself and those around you. A practice that I would take away is to collaborate with people from all backgrounds to honor our common humanity. And I think she did this across religious and cultural groups. And she really tried to remind herself, I think, that we're not from different planets. We're just from, maybe different religions or cultures, and we can learn from one another. So I'd like to just share kind of one more slide here, which is what's all three of these have in common. And I find this interesting because it reminds me of what I really am looking for overall in role models and what I seek for myself. They all stood for ethical ideas. Their ideas were different. They were from different philosophical schools, but they were based on ethical concepts on how to live well and striving towards those. They were all brave, made choices that weren't always very easy or comfortable, that got them in trouble, that got them killed, but they did it, and it's really remarkable. Human, they were not perfect. Each of them had flaws, each of them complex, and they're not unrealistic sages, which I think could be a difficult role model because it would be just too perfect. So they all spoke and they wrote publicly, even when it kind of cost them their lives to put their ideas out there, maybe. But I think that that's really critical. We should be out there as much as we can, sharing this so that we can learn from each other and be in community together. So with that, I'll say thank you, and please follow my writing if you can. You've heard the ways to do that, and I really appreciate your attention and being with me here today.
Thank you so much, Meredith. That was amazing. Everyone, if you'd like to express your appreciation in the chat or by giving an applause symbol through Zoom, whatever you would like. But thank you. That was so inspiring. I found it particularly interesting to hear about Hipparchia and Hypatia. Seneca obviously gets a lot more attention normally, so that was really enlightening. And while everyone is perhaps putting some questions in the chat, we have 1 or 2 minutes for questions, so definitely enter something. Okay, so Rogerio says, I wonder if the film Agora with Rachel Weisz playing Hypatia captured her life. I don't know if you're familiar with that film or if you have any.
I'm familiar with the film. I've actually watched about half of the film. I kind of got a little bit frustrated with the film because it's definitely not true to her biography, but I think it's maybe true to her spirit, in the sense that it really depicts her as this intellectual, engaged, brave person who is out there publicly speaking, teaching students from all backgrounds, challenging people. I think the movie also is maybe meant to tell a bit of a story about religious fundamentalism and how it can take over and be a force for, very bad things, which is also true. There's a whole backstory of how some of the libraries and some of the places of learning in Alexandria were destroyed in part of this process, and it's awful. And she was killed. So I think I have a bit of mixed feelings, but I think that the spirit of Hypatia is there.
So if someone wanted to see that movie, it could act as kind of a springboard for further investigation of Hypatia's life, but maybe watch it with a grain of salt.
Exactly.
Awesome. And just one quick question from Katie. If you could, maybe just a 60-second overview. What is the list for self-improvement you mentioned regarding journaling?
Oh, yeah. So what I kind of mentioned there is, in this case, I list out my own things where I say, these are things I could have done better. So it's really my own personal list. And so I encourage you to create your own personal list and figure out, oh, well, I see that I had a really strong reaction to that, and it really wasn't that big a deal. How could I improve how I respond to that? Or how could I improve my perspective on that? Or can I zoom out and do the view from above on that? So it's really, it's part of the journaling practice I do is literally listing the things. So I think it's an interesting practice to learn from.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Meredith. That was awesome. And I am going to now turn the show over to Simon, who will introduce Sharon Lebell.
All right. So yeah, thank you so much, Meredith. That was just beautiful. And actually some figures I wasn't really aware of through my study. So really, yeah, I appreciate you bringing them to our attention there. So, friends, Sharon and I are going to spend the next 30 minutes or so giving a little bit of our own perspectives on role models, mentorship, and the such, and then we'll have a little bit of a discussion. We really want your questions as well, but man, to introduce Sharon, Sharon Lebell, she's uh, I know I always go kind of flaky in my introductions, but she's just one of the most beautiful human beings I've ever come across in my life, and I consider her a friend. I consider her a mentor. I consider her quite profoundly to be a role model of mine. Uh, I came to know Sharon through her book. Many of you, I'm sure, will know it. It's called The Art of Living, the classical manual on virtue, happiness, and effectiveness. I was just looking on Amazon before. There's like, I don't know, 2,700 very positive reviews. Please go. If you haven't come across this work before, you really, really must dive into it. Sharon did such a beautiful job of taking the wisdom of Epictetus and packaging it in a way that really speaks to both the layperson and the person who is very familiar with Stoicism. She's a best-selling author. She's a speaker, and we're now in the same state, which is such a pleasure, Sharon. And I don't know, Sharon, would you like to say a few words before we dive in?
Well, I feel like I should offer some reciprocal praise for you, sincere. Simon is very much, fair to say, a mentor to me in just uncountable ways. And through our dialogues, most of which are spontaneous, I think we've both come to learn so much. But I'll tell you what, I'll start out. How does this sound, Simon? When I woke up this morning, I was just thinking about our group's topic here, and I thought I'd throw some ideas out, and then maybe over to you, and then you and I can discuss, and then we can all be together. How's that sound?
Hurrah, let's go.
Okay. Well, most important of all, the topic of this conference, everything. Here's, to my mind, what's most important of all. It's a great day. And it's a great moment. And it's a great thing that we're all together right here. So, philosophical role models. It's such an important idea. And heaven knows we need role models to give us hope in the goodness of which humans are capable. Well, this morning when I did an inward scan for philosophical heroes, those lovers of wisdom, past and present, who've most influenced me, what I kept thinking about is the beneficent aggregate effect of so-called everyday heroes, those often nameless, unsung, ordinary people whose moral reflexes and personal choices, what do? They create a social and spiritual ecology for the benefit of all. However, unwittingly, I think it's the actions of these people, known and unknown, where I personally locate my faith in humanity. Their words and their actions, they embody an answer to the question that religious people sometimes pose. What do you do, or what do you refrain from doing when nobody sees you but God, right? So, of course, we live in a culture that is dazzled by celebrity and intoxicated by stories of iconic heroes, philosophical and otherwise. There are the canonized. And these extreme standout stories of, gladiator heroism, the against all odds, practical and moral triumphs. These get enshrined in fable. And that's all well and good, but still, my personal applause goes to the people who are perhaps not exceptionally articulate or outwardly extraordinary. Those people who quietly and steadfastly act in small, consistent, honorable ways. Small, consistent, honorable ways. No pyrotechnics here. But let's get out of the abstraction. I'm going to give you a present day example of my current philosophical role model. And to my mind, he's a modern day Stoic, though he wouldn't even know what that means. His name is Jacob, and he's 23 years old. I've known him since he was 4. And Jacob's young life has been filled with just uncountable tragedies and trials, not least of which was the grievous loss of his mother when he was 2 years old. He's endured poverty and dispossession, but he's always had a strong moral compass and a passion for learning. Well, because of having an inauspicious skin color and having been in the wrong place at the wrong time, my dear Jacob, who never so much as jaywalked in his entire life, he's now in jail. Jacob and I stay in touch daily through letter writing and this really clunky texting service set up for the incarcerated. And I visited him in person last week, first time I was ever in a jail. How strange it was to walk these cold, cheerless halls of the jail. It was a place where imagination goes to die. Anyway, I eventually found my way to this weird claustrophobic visitor booth with its cloudy glass panel through which loved ones and the incarcerated meet. Well, there was Jacob in his jail jumpsuit, and he greeted me with $1 million smile. And he surprised me by having brought along a copy of Viktor Frankl's seminal book, Man's Search for Meaning. Well, for any of you who might not have read it, Frankl's book describes his personal and professional discovery that the concentration camp inmates from World War II, of whom he was one, those who survived and didn't go crazy, they were the ones who had a clearly defined and embraced life purpose. Jacob's copy of Frankl's book, it was filled with yellow highlighted passages, and he read many of them very solemnly to me, and then we discussed them. When we got it was the cane, when it was time to go, Jacob said to me, "Viktor Frankl understands me." Well, by his own description, Jacob is surrounded by every kind of influence that could suck him into an inexorable negative vortex for the rest of his life. His cellmate is a hardened meth addict, and it goes without saying, the jail does not provide an atmosphere of inspiration or hope. It's, on a good day, it's more like just a grueling sameness that chisels away at aspiration and any sense of new possibility. So there's this overall punishing sense that nothing will ever change. So it's not even worth trying. Yet, within this chaotic dullness that Jacob inhabits, he himself is a palpable radiance. He is present to the possibilities available in this present moment. He is seeing good meanings everywhere. And I don't mean in that false way, every day and every way we're getting better and better. It's not like that. Jacob is constructing, what would you say, elevating, even redemptive narratives for his future. I think what he's doing is making an infinite blessing out of a finite sentence. Jacob is in charge of his own mind. He is in charge of his own identity. He is in charge of his own relationship with himself and with others. When Jacob is released, he plans to use his jail experiences as part of his quest to study law, to become a lawyer, and to return to his home community to help out. Jacob is writing his own story. May we all write our own stories. Well, after I left the jail and re-entered the so-called regular world, the world of the unincarcerated, of the nominally free, I saw so many people annoyed by the smallest inconveniences of life. You know, things like a bit of slow traffic would undo them. We, I include myself, are the incarcerated. So sad. So much wealth of money, of human capital, of access to opportunity, of freedom of movement, of experience, and yet utterly incarcerated, not present to all the beneficent meanings available in this moment. Well, there's so little that I know, but this I know. Thanks to Jacob's example, we always have a choice of who we want to be in this moment and of what we wish to do. And this is a teaching I will cherish for life. And I think I would like to hear from Simon now.
Wow, thank you so much, Sharon. I mean, really, you're echoing so much wisdom that I'm sure we're all very familiar with in this room from the Stoics. You know, many of which had that experience of exile from their usual communities, cultures, and yet in face of that, I mean, and even Viktor Frankl carried on that tradition, right? They had the wisdom, and I have to say, Sharon, Jacob, I'm sure that he would say the same of you in terms of your influence on his life, and even having the wisdom when he was in jail to seek out that book, right? And it's actually, it's one of the things that I've been thinking about. You know, Sharon mentioned that we're often very spontaneous, right? And so we did a little bit of planning for this, but I think we both knew that what would happen here today would be what is happening here today, which is we're going to share from our hearts. But what I was really thinking about is what I know, helped Jacob with over his life, which is the refinement of that sense that we have for what is a worthy role model, or who is a worthy mentor to me. I remember when I was younger, so when I was about 11, we moved to a new farm. And when we got onto this farm, there were these 3 huge gum trees. This is over in Australia, gum trees that had been there for probably, 60, 70, 80 years, right? So these are massive trees. And they're all kind of standing kind of close to each other in the field. Now, one of those trees, 2 of them were straight. One of them, through the wind over its life, had been blown kind of in this direction. So it's still there. It's a huge tree, but it's at a crazy angle, right? And we're just waiting for that moment when one gust of wind just blows this thing over, right? And I remember when we were doing some landscaping on the farm, my dad and I, we found this beautiful gum tree that we wanted to plant. And it was probably about 2 years old, this gum tree. So, it was sturdy. It was a big tree. So we brought this tree in. We found a beautiful spot for it. We planted the tree. Then my dad did something. He went and he found a very sturdy stake that he could put in the ground right next to the tree, tie some rope connecting the stake and the tree. And I said, why are we doing this? And it became immediately clear. We don't want this tree to become like that other one that's over like this, right? We want this tree to be able to grow up strong, straight, okay? And it needed that help so that as it was growing, as it was digging its roots deeper, and as it was reaching up higher, as the winds came and blew this tree, we didn't want it to get into that habit of leaning.
Yes.
And so over time, this tree kept on growing up. Now, the sad thing is that later on, a gust of wind did come through and blew this tree right over. So I'm not sure, but that's perhaps because it didn't have the community that we have, right? Of trees around it to hold it there. But the point remains, I think that that is a beautiful metaphor, leaving out that it did eventually fall down. It is a beautiful metaphor for what we are looking for in a role model or a mentor in our lives. We're looking for that stake in the ground, somebody who is a picture of health, a picture of vitality in terms of the spiritual, the philosophical life, somebody who shows what it's really like to be a helpful, honorable human being, contributing to the communities, the culture, all this sort of stuff. And we're always looking for somebody who we can hold as that example next to us. But there's something else I was thinking, Sharon, which is that sense that we have, we're looking for that straight stake to guide us as we grow up. That sense refines over time. I mean, we can all remember being on the playground, right, as a kid, and you just have this raw sense of like wanting to find the kid who you look up to the most. And perhaps when you're young and immature and still developing your sense of who you are and what's valuable, what's important, you know, maybe that kid looks more like just the strongest kid on the playground who's able to push the most kids off the side. Or maybe it's like, you know, right. maybe it's the funniest kid, or it's the kid who has the most friends, or whatever it is, right? But we're born with this deep need to belong. And part of the way that we do that is by attaching ourselves to people who we kind of have this sense, well, I'd like to be like that person, or I'd like to, you know, have what they have, or I'd like to, whatever it is, it's this raw sense. And I just noticed just over my life, and I'm sure you've noticed this as well, Sharon, that search for mentorship, that search for a role model, it becomes more and more sophisticated and clear and conscious and aware. And I think what's important is that we become very conscious of the fact that we have that need as human beings, that we're always looking for that. And then the next question has to become, well, how do I refine my ability to really choose and look up to the right kind of role models? How do I not just be swept along by my culture to admire people who say, have the most money, or like I said, the young kid who has the most friends, or the kid who's pushing the most off the playground, right? And I noticed that started to happen for me as I went on this journey. You know, like when I was younger, actually just, you know, going through university, I was never really conscious of the fact that I was like looking up to these people trying to be like them. But then one day I went to this seminar by this motivational speaker, Eric Thomas. If you've ever heard him, he calls himself the hip hop preacher, and he'll just scream at you for like an hour until you're ready to take on the world. And so I went with my friend, and this guy screamed at me for an hour, and I went out of there with this one important takeaway, and it was information changes situations. And that was enough for me to say, well, I never read. I need to start reading. So I went and I bought books, and I started exploring. I started listening to Tim Ferriss, and here I am. I'm like, oh, Tim Ferriss, he's this entrepreneur. He's a great guy. He's got all this cool stuff. I'm going to be like him. And then when Tim Ferriss mentioned that one of his role models was a guy called Seneca, I said as a young man, I love Tim Ferriss. I better go read Seneca, right? And what Seneca did for me was he really started to refine my sense of what is worthy, what is admirable, what does it mean to live an honorable life. And he started saying, Seneca was saying all of these things that the motivational speakers, the hip hop preachers, all these guys, they were saying these things today, but Seneca was saying it in a much more sophisticated way and actually laying out the arguments for why this is worthy, why this is honorable, why you should look up to this sort of person, why you should aspire to be like this. And Seneca flipped a switch in my mind where I no longer was looking to the motivational gurus or the people who had the most money, or like you said, the people who are the strongest, whatever it is. I was looking for people who had a rich understanding of our culture. I was looking for somebody who could guide me philosophically to deeper truths, deeper understandings about who I am and my place in the world. And that led me into Stoicism. And then I came across this book called The Art of Living. And I was like, who's this Epictetus? Who is this guy? I started reading, and this beautiful, practical wisdom for everyday living really, really spoke to me. And that led me to Sharon. I got Sharon on my podcast, the podcast which I started because I was listening to Tim Ferriss. I was like, I better be a podcaster, right? But I interviewed Sharon, and we immediately had this beautiful connection. And for me, this adventure that we go on as human beings, of looking up to people, of seeking guidance, seeking that straight and narrow path. I've been so fortunate to now be in touch with Sharon, and I have to say, Sharon, like, you know, they always say don't meet your heroes because they'll always disappoint. Sharon, you don't disappoint. Right? So having gotten to know you more now, and so I think for me, there's two things that have just been really on my mind, and especially after we spoke this week, Sharon. It's we need to learn to become conscious and aware that when we look up to people, when we are seeking out role models and mentors, we're looking for the person who most matches what we find to be most valuable, most honorable, most worthy, right? We're looking for those kinds of examples, which means that we have to come back to that sense that we have, and we have to refine that sense. We have to refine what it is that we're looking for. Because whether it's finding somebody who can help you to belong as a human being on the playground, or finding somebody like Seneca who makes you feel that belonging to the cosmos, right? We're all looking for that belonging. And when you refine that sense, I've just found that just the quality of the people that we find, we come across. And Sharon is exactly right. That can be the average, it can be a mechanic. It can be, you know, a family friend. It can be a random person you meet on the street. But as you refine that search, and especially if we come from the Stoic lens where, you know, wisdom is wisdom, it doesn't matter whether you have more money, more friends, more power, more influence, you'll start to recognize wisdom when you see it. And then you see role models everywhere in the small actions. I'm going to throw it over to you. I'm going to stop rambling now, Sharon. But
if I could jump in,
I don't even know if we have time.
We are supposed to be going on break right now, but if it's okay with you two, I will say anybody who needs to go on their break right now, we will come back in about 5 minutes. Sharon and Simon, if you don't mind, maybe just taking a couple of questions from the audience right now, or if you wanted to wrap up where you're headed with that, Simon. So anyone who needs a break, this is your time right now. We have a tight schedule, but I do want to hear a little bit more from Simon and Sharon. So thank you so much. So there's a great question here from Rogerio. Are there any good books in terms of how we can develop character judgment so that we can refine our ability to choose the right role models, but also friends, partners in life, business, etc.? So do you have any thoughts on that?
What do you think, Simon? Do any come to mind for you?
Oh man, I mean, it's a tough one, right? If you lean Stoic, better start looking at the Stoic books. If you lean
Yeah.
Christian, you're probably going to be leaning to the, to the Christian books to refine that sense. I think it, on a much broader level, it's the philosophical path. It's trying to gain an understanding
Yeah.
of what is truth, what is wisdom, where do I find it, what is virtue, what does it look like, what does it feel like, and these questions have been discussed and debated by all the great philosophers. So just go there, and one book leads to the other. So refine that search as you walk on that path, right? You'll be led in different directions. I don't know, Sharon, what do you think?
I think a lot of time, amen to everything you just said. And I think a very valuable place to start is in memoirs and biographies of people who, well, they merit having their lives be on a public stage because they went through trials, because they were in that crucible, whatever it is. And I think we as readers find out those highest values that we cherish by being engaged with the story of other characters who have traversed hardship.
I love that so
Amen
much.
to
If I
that.
could just add one thing, I think that used to be a common conception of what philosophy was in ancient times, right? People did study the lives of philosophers. In fact, one of our most valuable sources of information on ancient philosophy is called Lives of the Philosophers by Dionysius, right?
Yeah.
Because people did find value in not just what a philosopher wrote about, but how they lived their lives. And so I think anyone who is committed to living a practical philosophy, a philosophy of life, does need to go back and look at the lives of the people, not just, not just how they presented themselves in public, but actually what they actually did in their lives, just like we're doing here today. So
Yes.
absolutely. Thank you so much. And I will go ahead and wrap up. We could stay here for about 2 hours, I think, talking with the two of you.
Let's do
But
it. No.
this was so
Thank you, Brittany, and thank
beautiful.
you, Sharon.
Oh,
Yes, thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you. It's been terrific to be with everyone.
Thank you so much to both of you. And everyone, please, I know some of you have already put your applause and your positive comments in the chat, but please do show some love to Sharon and Simon for this very inspiring talk. And while we are doing that, I will go ahead and introduce our next segment, which I am very excited about because this is our panel. So we want to change up the energy a little bit, get a group of people talking to you now, especially coming right back from your break. And so I'm just going to introduce one of my favorite people in the world, Eve Riches, who is my co-founder, co-conspirator at Stoicare. And Eve is also a neurodivergence mentor. She's a life coach and employment consultant specializing in well-being at work. She works with individuals, families, businesses, and organizations. She's also on the steering committee of Modern Stoicism, where she runs Stoic Week every year with Tim Lebell. I know many of you have participated in that. If you have not, go right now to the Modern Stoicism website, which is modernstoicism.com, and look up Stoic Week and definitely participate in that the next time around. It's usually in October. And that's a free yearly course in well-being, which is enjoyed by thousands of people every year with wonderful results. And of course, she is a director of Stoicare. And you can learn more about her or get in touch at her website, which is everiches.com. So I will now turn it over to Eve to introduce you to the panel.
Trying to work out if I've highlighted everyone for everybody. I have, haven't I? Have I got Hugh Scott and for those of you who don't know me, I've got a severe visual impairment. So somehow I've ended up in charge of like clicking on everyone. So I think I've got both Scott, Nona, Trevor. Yeah, I think we're all here, aren't we? Excellent. It's a great start. Well, welcome everybody who's agreed to be on the panel. I'm just checking whether I've made it so that you can all unmute yourselves, or if not, Brittany, if you can help me do that, because I'm sure I've left someone so they can't unmute themselves. Yeah, as it's Scott that, all right, that can't unmute himself. I'll just So yeah, so because I said thank you for introducing me, Brittany. That was brilliant. But I've certainly had experience of being introduced like, in all sorts of weird and wonderful ways. I thought it'd be really great to ask if you don't mind introducing yourself. So should we start with Nona, if you don't mind? If you'd just like to briefly tell us about yourself.
Hi. Yeah. I basically am a dressage coach. That is the second part of my life. I juggled a real job out in the real world for a long time. And then I retired, and actually people find me. I tried not to advertise because I would rather be found as a dressage coach and a teacher, because all I see myself as basically a mentor that wears breeches and boots and has the medium of the horse to find my real clients for being their life coach and their guide. It separates me in my industry from the ego, self-serving, agenda-driven sport that it is. So I am a bit of a unicorn, but I've had the benefit of having a lot of young ladies in my life, as I don't have any children myself, a lot of young ladies to mentor and bring along. And so I call them my dressage daughters. And they can be anywhere from 16 to 45, doesn't matter, still a daughter.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And what an interesting, I don't know, like different area of coaching to bring to the table. I'm so glad to have you here. And
Thank you.
so how about Scott Perry? Would you like to tell us about yourself?
Absolutely. So really pleasure to be with you all. And I am Scott Perry. I'm an Encore life coach at Creative on Purpose, where I share insights that are informed by ancient philosophical and spiritual traditions to inspire a life of greater intention and integrity. And my mission is to help my clients and community members find more fulfillment and less anxiety while they live their legacy doing work that they love with people that they care about.
Well, that sounds brilliant, Scott. I love that. I know it's so beautifully explained. I always find when I try and introduce myself, I can barely even explain what it is that I do. So that's really great. And how about you, Trevor?
Yes, hello. So my name's Trevor. I'm a psychotherapist, cognitive behavioral psychotherapist from New Zealand. So there's a few. I'm actually surprised I'm here, because normally us Antipodeans, we're only allowed one per call. So the fact that there's a couple of us floating around is we've doubled the numbers. I moved to the UK, where I worked for 30 years, and now just sort of hide out a little bit in France and the UK. I feel like an imposter here, as I normally do, because I'm just a bulk standard clinician in the NHS, etc. And it's normally I hide behind Tim and latterly Eve, so I feel much more confident in my stoicism. I guess stoicism is something I went to Stoicon in 2019 in Athens. So if you're going to start any sort of Stoic interests, why not go to Athens and have a lovely holiday as well? And it's where I met Tim, and we started this idea of Stoic supervision, or how do we do supervision in CBT, CFT, DBT, EMDR. All my therapies come as a bunch of initials. My apologies. And so it's really from that my interest has grown. That's me.
Thank you, Trevor. That's really helpful. And you know, we've often talked about how CBT is kind of like one of the modern forms of Stoic practice. So yeah, it's really great to have you here representing
Thank you.
CBT as well. And last but by no means least, Scott, Corey, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody to the panel. Thank you, everybody, for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. My name is Scott Corey. I am the mentor at the Stoic Archer Academy, where I do one-on-one mentorship. I teach classes such as grief, and we participate in organized charity events. I come from 15 years of psychotherapy with a specialization in addiction therapy. Thank you for having me.
Well, wonderful to have you here again. I feel like I'm always trying to rope you into something. So, so I was thinking about a topic and you know, all of us being kind of, you know, coaches or therapists or mentors. And what are, do you think, in the opinion of the panel, what are the important factors that we need to think about for ourselves being potential role models or Stoic role models for the people we work with? And I guess as a slight kind of additional question to that, are we role models? Can we choose? You know, does it matter? Should we be thinking of ourselves as role models and mentors when we are coaches? So, so I don't, does anyone want to jump in first, or if not, I can like ask you one at a time. Yeah,
I can start.
yeah.
I think the first and most important part of mentorship is to take care of yourself first and to make sure that you're always practicing cosmopolitanism. And if we are going to be able to mentor and love and guide and offer insight and wisdom and show courage to the circle of care that would involve our mentee, which is could be our family, could be our friend, could also be our community, could even stretch out beyond people that we know. And when we stop taking care of ourselves, everything else in our life falls apart. So in order for us to be mentors, we must first take care of ourselves.
That's really that's something you and I have talked about quite a lot, isn't it? How you see people in the industries that we all work in becoming very burnt out, and in that way perhaps not being a good role model because they're so depleted. And it's interesting that you say about it kind of being wider than just the people we work with, because like Nona, you'd already said about how the girls and the women that you work with are almost like daughters to you. Do you think that they sort of look up to you as a role model and as an almost like in some ways, like not in an unhealthy
Absolutely.
way, but like a parent in some ways?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, you know, they meet me because I have something that it's a fantasy maybe. You know, there's this woman riding this brilliant animal and makes it look like it's gliding on glass, and you know, they don't know they just looked at 42 years of work. But they come and that's the dream, right? Okay, so that sets them up to pick the person that they want to be like. So typically the horse helps me with who finds me. But once they do lock on, I think I agree with Scott very much about you have to take care of yourself because you cannot be a leader of other people if you first cannot lead yourself well. And people are always looking, whether they want you as a mentor or not, people are always looking. So you really need to be able to walk the talk. But I really feel, and I've heard this in the others speaking today, a very big core of being a mentor is to show your flaws. And, you know, because especially with me, like I have this image of, oh, you know, well, yeah, but what did it take to get here? And I think that's what entices people once they hear my story. Oh, she did what? She overcame what? Well, maybe I could do that too. She makes it attainable because she didn't give me the impression that it is so out of reach or it is impossible to do, or she did it because she's so special. Not special. That's when you have that place that there's something calling at you to do. And I think I'm very blessed that I do something I love to do, take care of myself in doing it, stay healthy, keep the agenda out of it. As I believe I have my own self garage, that those that want that from me, as Simon said, that the people that will want you will, the wisdom that they see you execute or how you present yourself, and they gravitate towards you. And yes, I'm definitely seen as fairy godmother, horse mom. Yes. And I take that role on with pride.
I love
Greatly.
that. Fairy horse mother is the phrase of this whole conference. I think that's wonderful. Thank you. Trevor, do you think, because like I guess some of the work you do is within the house there, is because of the sort of I don't know, constraints around CBT. Do you feel like you still it's still important to be able to share something of yourself and sort of your own journey, like how Nona was saying there about not being like, oh yeah, I'm perfect, like being able to talk about your own struggles, or is that something that you're kind of in a way not allowed to do? Or
There's plenty of books written on it, Eve, that's for sure. Actually, it's a really interesting subject within psychotherapy, psychology, in the wider sphere. If you go right back to, say, Freud, the whole psychodynamic, we are a wall, etc. I'm moving on very quickly because I'm not psychodynamic. Carl Rogers came along, father of counseling, pioneer of, clearly didn't like Freud. Don't know what those guys were on about, but they didn't get on well. And, it's all about the therapeutic nuance and so forth. My guy, Beck, came along a little bit later and, integrated it. And I like Marsha Linehan, Deborah Lee, when we get to who we like. So it's a journey, and different therapies have quite, different thoughts on it. My take is, yes, we are role models, whether we like it or not, and more often not, we don't. We try. I like the whole idea of the Stoic sage. Tim Le Bon tells it very classically. I was laughing at the start with Sharon's likes those who are not so articulate. You love me then, Sharon. I'd struggle to spit out a word as a therapist. But the Stoic sage lost his shit in the boat, when everybody, along with everybody else. And then what's happening though is started bailing. So, I like that whole idea that we're allowed to have emotion, we're allowed to share, but in the end, it's about action. So Marsha Linehan, a DBT therapist, she talks a lot about sort of everything for her is radical because she's Californian, but it's radical acceptance, radical self-disclosure. So we are allowed to use self-disclosure. It's a very good tool, but I think I always have in my mind, what is it that I'm saying and how is that going to benefit my client rather than me? That client-centered approach of old Rogers still fits. So I can see Scott nodding, so I feel like I'm on safe territory here. So I'll stop talking now. Thank you.
that's so helpful, Trevor. And so that was Marsha Linehan.
Marsha Linehan, yeah. So dialectical behavioral therapy, sort of like an evil twin to CBT, because it's more like directive rather than not collaborative, but the cognitive approach.
And very interesting. I do think in terms of my background being in psychology, I think radical acceptance
that was
is
one of
those.
She loves it.
Yeah, I love it, and I feel like that was one of the things when I was quite young, and I came across radical acceptance of, this. And when you think about it, it's about the things that are kind of outside of your control. And it's another one of those kind of breadcrumbs of Stoicism, or whatever, however we could look at it, the things from Stoic philosophy that have come through into modern psychology and proven to be very, very useful, because I would argue it's kind of it's really the dichotomy of control, isn't it? And things like that, completely accepting the things that have already happened or are beyond our control. So yeah, it's very interesting that you raised that. And Scott Perry, so how do you feel your practice kind of sits within this? Can we disclose about ourselves? Are we a role model? Should we talk about our own struggles, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I love the question. I love all the perspective that's already been shared. My own take is that, following Sharon's translation of Epictetus, some things are up to us and others are not. And so, I for one, don't really pursue the idea of being a role model, because it's not up to me whether I'm seen as one. That's up to the perception of other people. And for me, I think of function over form. Stoicism certainly inspires and informs the way that I try to help people empower themselves to emerge and become the kind of person that they want to become. What I learned early on in my practice is waving my Stoic flag proudly in front of me was not a very effective way of helping the people that I wanted to help. And Epictetus says, try keeping your philosophy to yourself for a bit. And that has really helped me, because by simply expressing the idea that virtue is its own reward, using the dichotomy of control and the three Stoic disciplines to make the kind of change that I want to make in my life and the life of other people's, without announcing that it's Stoicism, has helped me connect more quickly and more effectively with people that want to make the kind of changes that Stoicism can help them make. And, if we want to talk about that later on, after the change has already been facilitated, it's actually a lot easier to get a little enrollment and buy-in into philosophy, as opposed to trying to sell the philosophy first and then use it as a tool to make change happen.
That's very interesting, and it's really good advice, I think, because and I know the ancient Stoics sort of talked about this as well, that I think people can get so excited that they've found some rules for living that really help them, and then if you're not careful, it's like you're literally telling people at bus stops, let alone bringing it into your professional work and probably talking far too much about it, like starting every interaction with it, rather than like you were saying, perhaps just live it. And then if someone is interested or further down the line, you can be like, well, interestingly, all of these things we've been working with, they're actually part of a system of thought. It can be really exciting for people at the right point to start to realize that, isn't it? But yeah, you're right. Maybe not going in too hard with like, hey, let me tell you all about Stoic philosophy right from the beginning. Thank you. That's a really useful thing. I feel like I'm getting a lot of useful things to consider from this in my own work. So Scott Corey, you actually you covered one of the things I was going to say as a potential follow-on question from this. I know it's something you and I have talked about quite a lot, about what are the potential downsides to either being or thinking of yourself as a role model and as a mentor, or from the perspective of anyone who's sort of looking up to a role model or a mentor. That there might be some pitfalls in there. I think I can't remember which one of you, was it you that mentioned ego? Someone said something about ego, but is there anything that you feel is useful, perhaps from Stoic philosophy, or that helps us to avoid falling into any of the issues that might arise in a mentoring relationship? So either like a official mentoring relationship, or just the relationships we have in everyday life?
Thank you for the question. I think I'd like to answer it from the perspective of how we see our role models and the potential pitfall in that regard.
Mm.
And when I look at mine, I like to remind myself of part of a very long, beautiful quote from Marcus Aurelius, where he says in it that we all share the same blood. And in this way, it is to remind us that I am flawed, and the role model that I am looking at is also flawed. And the thing that I like to attach to that is the virtue of wisdom, and to understand that we can learn from all things, not just good things. So when our role models make mistakes, it is still, in fact, they're still, in fact, in that position of being role modeling, because what they do after that mistake is what we will learn from and how they recover from that.
Yeah. So I guess the potential pitfall is maybe where we might idolize the person that's acting as our mentor or as our role model, and we're kind of putting them on that pedestal and thinking, yeah, thank you. And that kind of relates back to what you were saying, Nona, about how if people are looking at you after all of this work, which I'm assuming, because I was my my accountant is a horse rider and is like really into it, and she was talking about people falling off, and I was thinking, wow, it's really dramatic what can go wrong in the world of horse riding, isn't it? It can be really severe. And you were saying that sometimes the girls and women that are looking up to you, they're almost like, do you think they potentially see you as a role model as almost unattainable, what you're doing? You know, it's like it's so great. And so, yeah, do you think there's a potential? Oh, has she
Oh,
disappeared?
mine just frozen, I think.
Yes, I'm going to shut my video off. Oh,
Helps with the
sorry, I'm shutting
bandwidth,
my
doesn't
video
it?
off because my bandwidth is low. I might, yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, yeah. So,
Can hear you.
yes, Eve. What I would say to you mostly, can't hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, my bandwidth, yeah. Oh, you can. Okay. So, I would say to you that yes, what I do, especially in the dressage, is so difficult to attain it that it can be misconstrued that it's unattainable. Whatever. I always ask my students, what did you just learn? What are you learning? I want them to learn to articulate back me, because basically what they need to do is to a creature and to another being, meaning even me. But to answer you even fully about the pitfall, I have to be careful of, as a mentor to my mentee, is not to put my expectations on them. In being a mentor, you can give an almost, if I got disappointed or I felt that I wasn't maybe getting what I should get or giving what I should get, only it's because I put an expectation on there. And I do think that's attached to ego. And becoming a much more effective mentor, I no longer have any expectation in any way. I am there in the present moment, and every time is the present moment, whether a student stays with me for 14, 15 years or one day. And, the other thing I do run is a women's philosophical stoical meeting once a month. Same thing there. Whether everybody attends, the same people attend, some people drop off. It's not anything to take personally or put eggs on. It's to be available with what you have in that moment. And I think that's what's active, when you can give to some free without expectation, judgment, and just assessment and giving of what you think they need in that moment the best you can.
Thank you, Nona. And if you're having trouble with bandwidth, you could always try like leaving and coming back in, if you know what I mean. I don't know why, but sometimes that works, doesn't it? Thank you. No, I think you're right. It's about kind of potentially the role model or mentor can end up like you were saying, sort of putting your expectations onto people, and like Scott was saying about, egos becoming involved as well. And that links with what you were saying, Trevor, about when the mentor or role model is disclosing about their own struggles and their own journey. I really love the way that you said, I have to ask myself whether this is to benefit me or to benefit the client. Do you feel like that ever goes wrong? I don't mean for you personally, but it doesn't.
Yes, yes. I could write a book. In fact, I will write a book. I haven't written a book. I think I feel like I'm the only one around that hasn't. I would write a book called 1001 Behavioral Experiments That Have Gone Wrong. And I was like, it could be good. I think for me, actually, this is quite a simple question, really, in the sense of how to avoid the pitfalls, because so part of my accreditation, part of how I maintain my great book idea, thank you. I got another one called How to Be Happy, Be Your Own Zookeeper, but that's between me and Eve. So the last talk we did was on burnout and the sort of external internal systems that lead to burnout. British NHS, it's wonderful, but has its problems. And then our own sort of expectations, our own perfectionism, our own subjugation, all these sorts of things that go on. That's what supervision's for. So I think whether you're mentoring, coaching, in clinical therapy, whatever, shape or form that you offer engagement, it's about having some feedback loop that gets that. And supervision's a strong thing within my area. We have various rating scales and things that we've got to do. There's various things I have to do to keep my accreditation. So there's a formal way of doing it, and I think there's an informal way through reading, self-directed learning, and all of these sorts of things. But they come together to keep us sharp. If we were a carpenter, we'd sharpen our tools or do whatever carpenters do. And I think as clinicians, in whatever shape or form we're doing it, it's exactly the same thing. How do we stay safe? How do we stay sane?
I think that's so true, Trevor, and it's really interesting because I wonder whether it kind of links to what Sharon was also saying about journaling and
Yes.
what Stoics would say about self-reflection, that journaling is almost like a kind of self-supervision, isn't it? Really?
100%.
Get it out. What did I do today that didn't go well?
Yeah, only the human brain writes. The cerebral cortex writes. The limbic system, the zebra, oh no, it's out of the bag, and the crocodile, the amygdala, they don't write. They're visual, which is where trauma sits, of course. So only the human brain writes. So we love getting our patients writing, journaling, and I always do it like just over a cup of coffee. So, plan in the morning what you're doing, or if you're in the UK, a cup of tea. And then in the evening, have another cup, decaffeinated, obviously, as you reflect upon it. And, in CBT, we love a thought log, an activity log, an ABC. Oh, my God, we write and write and write. We loves it. Yeah.
Brilliant. And that's, we could argue that it's all been kind of, borrowed, hasn't it, from
Eve, it wasn't borrowed. It was just blatantly stolen and repackaged.
It was ripped off.
We are shameless in the way we do it.
You do, thank you. And so, Scott Perry, what in your work or watching the work of other people, what kind of pitfalls do you think you see within coaching and mentoring? In terms of the person who's, the mentee, as some people like to call it, or the person who's being coached, or on the point of view of the coach or role model?
That's a great question. I love the answers that everyone's given already. One of the things that came up for me is amongst my community and clients, we often are talking about the gurus, and that's almost a pejorative. Someone mentioned influencers, and sometimes influencer and guru are used interchangeably. And the danger of trying to be a person of influence is that you get very enamored of the attention. You are all about the impressions, and it takes place of the impact, and all about the reach, and attention. You start to crave attention over the actual action of seeing the people that you're serving improve themselves in the way they want to improve. But the word guru is actually really interesting, because the ancient etymology is dispeller of darkness. And so I think it really comes down to what kind of guru do you want to be? And if you are truly the kind of guru that wants to be a dispeller of darkness, what you're trying to do is mentor, coach, role model your way out of a job. Your job is to help other people stay in their power to be their own ally in their journey of emergence and fulfillment and finding meaning. And so, yeah, I think the danger, and I have certainly fallen into it, is, you know, you start to lose track of what really matters. If, you know, what really matters at the beginning is the change that you can help people make. And as you get more attention and as you get more impressions and reach, you can start to find yourself wandering off the path. And so for me, it's, you know, Stoicism is so powerful because it provides so many reminders for us to check ourselves before I wreck yourselves. I think that's Marcus Aurelius.
I love that. And it's something I was talking about with somebody the other day, that it's one of the potential dangers within paid for therapy and coaching. I had a family I was working with recently where the young person that I've been mentoring is getting to the end of her need for me, which is absolutely fantastic. And I was talking about it with her mom and saying, I think she's ready to, either stop, or she could see me like once a month or once every 2 months if it was helpful for her. And the mom was like, but will you be okay? Like, as if it was taking I was like, what? And I realized she was thinking that I will lose money, and that, it was like as if you've decided to stop seeing a particular hairdresser. She was seeing it like that. And I was thinking, wow, it is built into the system, what you were saying, Scott, Pete, that whole thing about how you could lose sight, couldn't you? Either because of ego and you're thinking of yourself as like, in a kind of guru kind of a way, or because you're kind of getting comfortable, or you're needing the money, and so you're not doing that thing of thinking, I need to talk myself out of a job. So it is a weird job that we do. It's like if you were a hairdresser, but instead of cutting hair, you were teaching everyone to cut their own hair to the point where they didn't need you anymore, isn't it? Which is quite an odd thing that we do, and it's something we have to be so mindful of. And while we're still with you, Scott, I was thinking about how maybe a lot of our audience might be very aware, or somewhat aware, of the ancient texts and the kind of classic sort of ancient writings around Stoic philosophy. And then you've also got, obviously, like we were talking about, Sharon's wonderful book. You've got these books that are quite famous that are modern Stoic. But I was wondering about whether there are people who are kind of natural Stoics, even though they might not call themselves that, that have been important to us, or Stoics that we might not have heard of or had recommended, that could be authors, but even artists or musicians, or there might be like a Stoic film or a television series, or that kind of broader places where we might find inspiration. So Scott Perry, do you have anything that you would like to share with us, that you think we may not have come across or might not have thought of it like that?
I love the question. I think that for me, many of the biggest influences on my life, especially as a young person, came from film and literature. I collided with Marcus Aurelius in the 7th grade thanks to a teacher. And speaking to what Sharon said earlier about Jacob hearing Viktor Frankl speak directly to him, Marcus Aurelius spoke to me in that way. So I always have Marcus kind of looking over my shoulder and whispering in my ear about what I should and shouldn't be doing. But people like that I met in books and movies, the ones that come to mind are Larry Darrell, played by Tyrone Powers in The Razor's Edge, is someone I really admired and looked up to as a role model as a young person. I would say Atticus Finch, also in To Kill a Mockingbird. You know, and I love both as films and as literature. And then just to cite maybe one work of fiction, or you know, one other book outside of the Stoic tradition, Arjuna, the main character, the protagonist, and the Bhagavad Gita, it has been someone that has really informed and inspired my life as a person that wants to, you know, wants to be the best person they can be now, while I'm pursuing becoming a better one in the future.
That's fantastic. I love all these recommendations. I'm writing everything down. So um, this is why I wanted to ask this question. It's completely selfish. I love hearing recommendations that are things you might never have come across if someone hadn't shared it with you. Nona, do you have a recommendation for, like, you know, a book or a film or an author or anything that we might not have come across?
Well, I want to first say that I am not a natural Stoic. That's why I
Yeah.
feel Stoicism was so strong, because I had to learn how to navigate the instant emotion to serve me better than it was doing. So I had to learn to put my emotions in subjection to reasoning, and then use my emotions in the right way as a complement to my reasoning. And my role model, young, was my Latin teacher, who tried to introduce Cicero to me. So the foundations were put there, but I have to say the greatest Stoic role model I've had for the last almost years has been my husband. He's a very natural Stoic, and he always reminds me that there's a peace in there that you can have in peace no matter where you are. As far as literature goes, I would say anybody new to Stoicism, I really loved the Handbook for New Stoics, and to help me with journaling. I love Brittany's book. I use it in the women's group all the time. And recently, I just watched a movie on Netflix, The Professor. It's Johnny Depp is in it. I didn't even recognize him right away, but he's really found out he's going to die and how he handles it. And it's a very local approach. So
Thank you so
that's
much.
kind of a fun one.
That's brilliant, and I love that we're getting film recommendations as well. And oh yeah, we've still got some time. Trevor, do you have any particular kind of authors, or, like I was saying, it could be an artist, a musician, film?
Yeah, there's a couple. I like Brené Brown. I often quote Brené Brown at people. I think there's a person who's a Stoic.
Yeah.
I don't know if she knows it or not, but there's another person, Eleanor Longden, who's a psychologist in Manchester, who I've had utmost admiration for. So she works at the thing called the PRU, the Psychosis Research Unit in Manchester, and so she works in psychosis, but also experienced psychosis herself. Voice hearing, was in hospitals, was abused in hospitals, etc., and so forth. And so when I was involved in some research in psychosis and stuff like that, and it was quite interesting. So I heard voices at various times in my life as well, and so it was quite nice going back to your self-disclosure. And I found Eleanor to be truly inspirational, and to me shows all the compass of Stoicism, you know, the courage, the wisdom, the tolerance, the honesty, and the genuineness in the middle. So I always highly recommend her. And
Sorry, just to check, was that Eleanor Longden?
yeah, Eleanor, and then Longden, Longdon, I think. But if you type in psychosis talk and TED, she pops up. And so really, really good. The book I'll wave at your face is The Gendered Brain by Gina Rippon. And again, if you've got any time, Gina is definitely a Stoic. My daughter was at Birmingham University, and this is just the book you should give all of your daughters, all of your sons, and all of the non-binary children in between, because it is absolutely inspirational and just corrects a few sort of outrageous wrongs. Another just unknown Stoic. And then the final one is The Dragons of Eden. So I like compassion focused therapy because of what it drives us through. And just this was the original one that Paul Gilbert and Deborah Lee then took their work from, and so forth. My own personal Stoic is Kane Williamson, which will mean absolutely to nothing to most of you, because I believe most of this is an American audience, but Simon Drew might clock it, as he's the captain of the New Zealand cricket team. And cricket, strange game that a few countries in the world play. New Zealand were in the final of the World Cup. We were winning it comfortably when a ball bounced off somebody's bat, a New Zealander playing for the English team. We lost, and Kane went, well, you know, you control what you control and let go of the rest. Entire New Zealand nation's crying, and he was the only one showing stoicism. He is my hero. I hope never to meet him in case I get disappointed.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for all that, Trevor. And finally, Scott, you've got Scott Corey. You've got a couple of minutes. Who would you like to recommend to us?
Thank you. I'll recommend just one. And this one is a book called Courage Under Fire, and it's by James Stockdale. He is might be one of the most modern Stoics that I have come across recently. And this book isn't for the faint-hearted. So it is about being a prisoner of war in the Vietnam. And he actually, I'll just give a little bit. I want to give all of it away, but he actually, while he was captured next to his partners, he used Morse code by knocking on the cell walls to ask his cellmates Epictetus philosophical questions. And he kept their minds engaged for months and months. And that's just a little bit of it. Throughout that fantastic story that he has, he comes out what's called the Stockdale Paradox. And what that is an unwavering faith that despite your current circumstances, the future will get better. And I recommend it to you all.
That's wonderful, and it really fits with. I know I'm not on this panel, I'm hosting it, but no one can stop me, so I'm going to do a recommendation. So yeah, I think one of the first natural Stoics I came across was Kate Bush, and her I've probably talked about this before online, her song, The Jig of Life from the Hounds of Love album, where she's talking about someone who's fallen through ice and is drowning, and a vision of herself from the future comes to her and says, you can't give up in this moment, because you know you've got this whole life to live, and you will transcend this moment, you will get through, and you're going to have, you know, there's children you've not had, there's things you've not done yet, and you need to you know, get through it. And I feel it's very Stoic, it's very the view from above, and I think it's very, very strong imagery of that kind of being able to transcend and to hold on in the moment. And yeah, it's definitely been a huge thing in my life, and I love looking for these bits of Stoic philosophy that are, you know, that show up across all different media. Thank you so much, everyone, for your recommendation. I think I can see someone saying, could we put the recommendations into like a follow-up email or something? And I'm sure, Brittany, that we could arrange to do that, couldn't we? You know, like put them together as a I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone for being here on the panel. I've written loads of stuff down, so I found it so interesting hearing you talk. And am I passing back to you, Brittany? I don't know who's introducing Ranjini or whether
It's actually going to Simon. Thank you.
over to
Jump in.
Simon. Okay, fantastic. Right, I will just
Yeah, thank you so much, Eve, and everybody in the panel. It's
everyone.
really, really beautiful and informative, and Okay, cool. Excellent. Is that Eve, is that you controlling which faces we see?
Yeah, I'm
You're,
just doing yeah,
wonderful.
I'm just
Well,
taking
look, everybody, our next and our final speaker for the day, we're really grateful and honored to have Ranjini George with us
I'm going
here.
to take off.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about Ranjini before we hand it over to her. So she is a celebrated writer and academic whose literary contributions have graced numerous esteemed publications. She's been honored with several awards, including the Arnold B. Fox Award in Research Writing and the first prize in Canada's Coffee Shop Author Contest. Ranjini holds advanced degrees in English and creative writing from Northern Illinois University, St. Stephen's College, New Delhi, and also the University of British Columbia. A notable book, Through My Mother's Window, Emirati Women Tell Their Stories and Recipes. This book was published in 2016. In 2019, she received the Excellence in Teaching Award from the University of Toronto's School of Continuing Studies. And just in my time interviewing Ranjini and having her in my presence as well, I mean, she's just a person who exudes this beautiful peacefulness that comes from a life dedicated to the philosophical path. And so we're really grateful to have her with us here today. And I'm looking forward to introducing her now. Ranjini, jump in and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you so much. It's always so good to be here, and maybe we can take off the handout and just post it on in the chat. So I don't really need it now, but so people can have it later. But I'm sorry to have missed the earlier part of the conference because I was teaching, just got off a creative writing intro class. And, as we begin with mentors and talking about our philosophical role models, past and present, I want to extend my thanks, Simon Drew, to you for your creativity and initiative in having this, and to Brittany, a dear friend who inspires me by being so calm and so loving and wise and open-hearted. And so we are very fortunate as we walk this philosophical path, to have friends who share our values, share our aspirations. Otherwise, it can feel quite lonely. Marcus Aurelius is not right here, but it's so, I am inspired by friends like you. Thank you so much. So I thought we'll begin with, I wanted to begin with Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a Zen teacher. And, often people will say, how do you spell his name? So I have a handout which Brittany will post in the chat. And so it has the sources, the names, and some references of books that you might be interested in. So Thich Nhat Hanh is a Zen monk. He passed away last year. He was nominated by Martin Luther King Jr. for the Nobel Peace Prize. His teachings on mindfulness and his teachings on compassion are really born from the time of the Vietnam War. So he lived through the Vietnam War. He lived through a time of great conflict, and he was also exiled from Vietnam. And so he was exiled for 44 years. He lived outside his home country, and his books are really born, and his teachings are on peace and nonviolence are really born through these difficult circumstances. So one of the things that one of his verses or gathas, his everyday verses that I use every single morning, and he's adapted things from Zen to make it secular and available to everyone. And I'm going to recite it to you, even though it's not the crack of dawn where I'm at, but afternoon, and it's in the afternoon. So it's waking up this morning, I smile. 24 brand new hours are before. So I was talking about Thich Nhat Hanh, and and the Zen monk, and how I begin each morning with his gatha, which is really a reminder waking up this morning, I smile, 24 brand new hours are before me. I vow to live it in mindfulness and to look at all beings with eyes of compassion. So that very simple gatha every morning sort of reminds me that of compassion. It just reminds me to go beyond my, selfish preoccupations and to focus on others. And on some mornings, it's easier. And on other mornings, of course, it's harder to look at all beings with eyes of compassion, because very often and in the world we live in, we are so divided by skin, by religion, by countries, and division is sort of easier than reconciliation and connection and forgiveness. So Thich Nhat Hanh has a wonderful journal, which is on your reading list, which he wrote in 1960s. It's called Fragrant Palm Leaves. And in this journal, he really talks about your true self. So part of the practice that I really, in terms of connecting, like how do you live in this world, connecting to your true self, part of the thing, something that I do is my journaling practice that sort of helps me with that, and also my meditation practice. So I wanted to give you a taste just for a few seconds. Brittany, how much time do I have, considering I was off?
We'll give you a few extra minutes if you need it.
Okay, a few extra minutes. So I'll make it abbreviated. And so let's do, this will be good for me too. Just a second. Connecting to our body. So the first step is always just mindfulness of the body. And the second step is really connecting with our breath. So mindfulness of the breath. So this is another gatha by Thich Nhat Hanh. Breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I smile. Breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I smile. So Thich Nhat Hanh says that the miracle really is not walking on water. The miracle is walking on earth with mindfulness. And mindfulness, the way we often speak of it, is sort of reduced, and it's seen as a, as a tool, as a hack, but really practice. It's a deep practice, and it's a practice that includes concentration, and insight, and awareness. One of the other gathas I really like is that each step you make lead you closer to the Pure Land. And what is the Pure Land? The Pure Land is your own true self, living in accordance to nature, living according to your values. So, when I go through my life and I face challenges and, I'm in the midst of a discussion, maybe even a confrontation that I could get into, I ask myself, is this a step closer towards my values or not? The other gatha that I really like, which is taken from the Upaya Center, from the Buddhist tradition at the end of the day, is let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time passes quickly and opportunity is lost. Let us awaken, take heed. Do not squander your life. So the sense of just the preciousness of our time that Seneca and others talk about. So the other person, and I'm going to go through quite quickly, that I wanted to talk about is Marcus Aurelius, of course. His meditations, his notes to himself, is something that I look at again and again. And someone who really inspired Marcus was his adoptive father, Antoninus Pius. And book one of the meditations, when he talks about gratitude to different people, the person he spends the maximum amount of time on is Antoninus Pius. And in book 6, verse 30, he says, in all things, be a disciple of Antoninus Pius. And so one of the things I've done is actually look at some of the qualities that Marcus admires in Antoninus. And I'm actually looking at the Gregory Bayes translation. And one of the first qualities when he talks about Antoninus, who had power, who was an emperor, is compassion. And he says that he was compassionate. He talks about how he is calm, how he's methodical, how he, even when criticized, how he retains his equanimity, how he's quick to forgive. And to me, this is really an inspiration because, someone offends you, you want to retaliate, but even someone like Antoninus Pius, who had power in his hands, who had status, who had fame, was able to forgive, was able to learn from others. And so you can look at book 1 of the Meditations if you're interested, and look at some of the things that he praises Antoninus for. His adherence to decisions, his indifference to superficial honors, his hard work, his persistence, his dogged determination to treat people as they deserved, his altruism, his constancy to friends, never getting fed up with them or playing favorites, self-reliance and cheerfulness, his constant devotion to the empire's needs, his willingness to take responsibility, his respect for people who practice philosophy, and he never exhibited rudeness or lost control of himself or turned violent. You could have said of him, as they say of Socrates, that he knew how to enjoy and abstain from things that most people find it hard to abstain from and all too easy to enjoy: strength, perseverance, and self-control. So Antoninus Pius was someone who could rule an empire and was also really fit to rule his own mind. So we can see who Marcus Aurelius admired. So the other role model is very contemporary, and that is Anne Frank. And I teach her in one of my classes. I read the diary of Anne Frank when I was in the south of India, and I was 12 years old. And I read this diary, and after that, I kept a diary addressed to Anne. And one of the, I'm sure most of you here have read Anne's diary, and it sort of illustrates the fact that there was nothing that she could do about the war. There was nothing she could do about when the war ended. She hoped that it would resolve quickly. She hoped to live. But she did the one thing that she could do, which was write. And so I find that incredibly moving that at the age of 13 and 14, that Anne was able to keep this journal, and that she was able to, discipline herself, show up at this desk in this hiding place and work on her journal at 3 p.m. every afternoon. And this is one of the most poignant verses, diary entries. She says, "I'm becoming more and more independent of my parents." She's a teenager. "Young as I am, I face life with more courage and have a better and truer sense of justice than mother. I know what I want. I have a goal. I have an opinion, a religion, and love. If only I can be myself, I'll be satisfied. I know that I'm a woman with inner strength and a great deal of courage. If God lets me live, I'll achieve more than mother ever did. I'll make my voice heard. I'll go out into the world and work for mankind." I know now that courage and happiness are needed first. Yours, Anne and Frank. And this was written in the diary entry is in August 11th April 1944. And one of the things that I find really fascinating is that the paradox of life, what the Stoics remind us, with a symbol of the Stoic archer that, we prepare, we plan, and then we send out the arrow and there's a strong wind and it never reaches its mark. So Anne really had this aspiration to be a writer. She had the aspiration to live, and she had the aspiration to make a difference. And I don't know, when she died some months later in a concentration camp, whether she wouldn't have known if her diary was found, if it was preserved. She wouldn't have known that her voice continued. And it's a sort of strange paradox that really sometimes it may seem like closed doors and it may seem like nothing has happened and everything has ended in dust. But there is a sense that in another scheme, her voice did continue. Her journal was kept, her diary was kept and then given to her father, who was the only one who survived after the war. And it's been read by countless, by millions. And so her voice does echo through time, and her voice does make a difference. And so here was I at 12 years old in India, and I felt I knew her better than I knew the people in my class. And I understood her mind and her heart and her fears and her resilience. And I also understood the evil and the darkness that can also exist in both. So it was deeply influential, and I owe my first diary to Anne Frank. So she is a role model of someone who is beings. I hope my internet doesn't go. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
You're still with us
right now.
Okay, because
Hanging
it sort
on.
of shows us it's hanging on. It's on a hotspot. It shows me as unstable. Anyway, I'll wrap up really quickly. I wanted to end with the last sort of role model that inspired me, and it's a fictional character. I'm a creative writer, and so it's Wim Wenders' Perfect Days, which is a fabulous film. The actor Koji Yakusho, he won the Best Actor at the Cannes Film Festival just recently. And it's a film that really sort of advocates, it not advocates, it's a film that communicates simplicity, a connection to nature. And the main character, Hirayama, he cleans toilets. And he cleans toilets beautifully. And the people he interacts with, he sees deeply. And so he cleans the toilets and then at the end of the day, he reads William Faulkner, he reads in translation. And the film really signifies, the Japanese term komaraku, which is sunlight filtered through the trees, it never filters in the same way. So the idea that now is now. And there's something about the main character, Hirayama, that really inspires me in the sense of just living deeply, seeing people, and really listening to people, and connecting to nature and doing my work well. And he demonstrates, this fictional character, how little you actually need to have a happy life. In his past, he was wealthy, and doing the job he does is really a choice that he makes. I would say that even the director inspires me, Wim Wenders, who has Some of his famous films are Paris, Texas, and Wings of Desire. But this particular film is such a philosophical film. He's 77 years old, and here he is, with what I think is a masterpiece. And also Koji Yakusha, the Japanese actor who's 68 years old. Again, someone who really embodies that, or embodies that role. And both actor and director say that Hiraima is really a character they aspire to. They're not really that, but he is a character they aspire to. So on many levels. So I think role models are important for me. I was drinking coffee this morning from a Flannery O'Connor mug. Flannery O'Connor was diagnosed with lupus at 25 and died at 38. She's an American writer, Catholic writer from the South. I just find it really inspiring that these people remind me of the potential of a human being, whether it's Marcus Aurelius, whether it's a fiction character, Hiraima, whether it's Anne Frank in her very short life in just a terrible world, gone mad, that still the possibility and the potential of resilience within myself, the capacity of compassion, and capacity to really. Our life is so short and it's so brief, so they just remind us how to live well to the best of our ability. So thank you. I will end on time, and if there are questions. I really apologize.
So
No control.
Oh, don't worry about it. No worries. Listen, none of us should have imagined that we'd get through 2.5 hours without some Zoom glitch. Okay, so this is absolutely fine, and we just really appreciate you being here, Ranjini. Thank you.
Thank you,
now,
Simon.
Brittany, do we have time for a couple of questions?
Yeah. If anyone has a few questions for Ranjini, this is the last talk of the day, so we can go a couple minutes over if we need to. And again, Ranjini, I just wanted to say thank you. You mentioned some role models that don't often come up in philosophical discussions. So thank you very much for that. Very, very compelling.
Thank you, Brittany. And the handout is somewhere there on chat, right? If people want it, or...
Yes, I put a couple of things I just copied and pasted into the chat, and we can distribute the full handout later on.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So we have a couple of questions here. I was almost wondering, maybe we could actually go back in the chat a little bit to Rogerio's question here. Just I felt like it was very nice and appropriate too. When you feel you're going off track on your path of virtue, what helps you to recover your bearing and to stay on track? And I'd really like to hear Ranjini's answer to that too.
Well, I'm always going off track. Seneca's questions, how did you do today? And, from the golden verses of Pythagoras, what could I have done better? What did I leave out? Not just in terms of work, but just I think work, yes, but as a human being. And so many days I go off track. And I think, the idea of taking breath breaks, the idea of actually just coming back to present moment and reminding myself of what kind of human being I want to be, sort of helps me. And then I have things like, Pema Chandran talks about the 4 R's, which is, you recognize that you're upset, which is the first R, and then the next R, you refrain from acting. The third is you resolve, that, you relax, and then the fourth is you resolve. So, a little while ago, and a few days ago, someone said something that upset me, and I was upset, the proto-passion of being upset, but I remembered to refrain. And then I hung on to the idea of refraining, and then trying to relax through meditation, through just whatever practice. So I think soaking myself in the teachings I have Marcus Aurelius on my wall here. I also have Thich Nhat Hanh, Flannery O'Connor. So it's just a visual reminder for me. But yes, I'm far from perfect, always falling off the path.
Well, there wouldn't be a path if there wasn't an off the path, right?
Exactly.
They're
Exactly.
perfectly intertwined. I think we also just had, Kate was just wondering, what was the name of the book again, with the story about the person who cleans toilets?
So it's actually a film. So it's a film by Wenders, and it's called Perfect Days. And it's actually showing, I know that it was showing here. So it's called Perfect Days. And I've uploaded the link of the trailer on the handout, but it's a beautiful film.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I think we just have one more question from Meredith. How do your influences and role models influence your own writing?
My own writing? I think without all these things, I would sometimes get discouraged with writing because writing takes a long time. I think it reminds me to just be present on the page every time I sit down to write, just to bring that present moment awareness and to, as Marcus Aurelius says, to drop all those secondary considerations of, will this get published? Will this happen? Will that, is this any good? But just to be present and to do my work to the best of my ability and to see the reward in the process. That really, it is a process. I also love what the Tibetan teachers remind that and Rumi, like the Sufi poet Rumi, that it's really not just me, it's beyond me. It's just connecting to the creativity of the universe, instead of being stuck. Like anytime I'm unhappy with writing, it's because I'm stuck with my egoic sessions, is this any good? Will people like it? And I want this to do well. But really the idea of the Stoic archer that, I'm exercising virtue and discipline and making good use of my human life by showing up, by being present. So.
Ranjini, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. And Brittany, I think this is a beautiful place to round off. And maybe if I could just say a few quick words, just to all of our guests, thank you so much for being here. It's again, it is just so meaningful that we've all chosen to be here. Everybody made a choice to be here today to spend this time. We all hoped that we would take away some wisdom here, and now is really the time for everybody to, as we sign off, reflect on just the little moments where something stood out to you or touched your soul, spoke to you in some way. And then a good follow-up question is why? Why did sit with that question? Why did this particular thing stand out to me? What am I supposed to take away here? What am I supposed to learn? And so, yeah, everybody, thank you for being here. And Brittany, I have just a whole new respect for your ability to manage a conference and to keep things going on time. You're a master, and I've really appreciated working with you on this project. And so, thank you so much for your just peaceful energy planning this. And it's I look forward to many more wonderful events between Stoicare and the Walled Garden.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure working with you and the Walled Garden and with all of our speakers. So another round of applause for Simon, for Ranjini, for Sharon, for Meredith, and for Eve for hosting the panel, and all of our panelists. Thank you so much to all of you. You were amazing. We couldn't do it without you. And to all of our audience members as well, thank you so much for being here with us today. We will try to get some videos up so you can go back and view the recordings. We will try, hopefully, if everything goes according to plan, we will save some of the chat and be able to send you some references as well. So again, thank you so much to everyone. And yeah, just so happy to have this wonderful, beautiful philosophical community.